Hello, and welcome to the Amateur Skeptics Podcast, podcast number 28. I'm your host, Brian. With me tonight, as always, is always there, Ian.
I've missed one. Well, not always.
Oh, I'm so sorry to accuse you of that. And the other hanger-on always seems to be there every time I turn around, Mac. Oh, now he's not talking to me.
My consistency is legend.
Yeah, and tonight with us, guys, we have a special guest. She used to be one of our hosts, one of our co-hosts, whatever. We have with us tonight Jen.
Hello. I'm back.
You usually only talk in the last part of the show.
I know. It's funny how I just show up at the very end.
So, how's everybody doing this evening?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Doing all right.
I'm getting over some respiratory stuff, so if I go on mute, it's because I'm coughing.
No, we prefer it to you coughing. And it seems like we've taken care of all of our breathing problems.
Yep.
I'm not going to have to switch to zombies to do the podcast with.
Although that's not a bad idea.
No, it's probably not. Probably not.
They'd all agree.
Yeah. Well, the problem is it gets pretty boring real fast when they basically aren't going to say much more than brains.
If they even say that, it depends on your zombies. Not all of them are into brains.
True.
There you go.
You know, you get the slow articulate ones or you get the fast stupids. It's a trade-off.
All right, so Skeptic Camp coming up, and this is a different Skeptic Camp. The Mile High Skeptics we're working on our Skeptic, and Fort Collins has a Skeptic coming up. So I guess Kai is working on this, and Brian. I don't know how much Brian Walsh from the Rational Alchemy podcast. I don't know how they're friends up there. I don't know how involved he is. So that's going on February 28th.
Yeah, we met Kai last year at Denver Skeptic Camp.
28 or
26.
26. This Saturday.
This Saturday. So
if you're listening to this next week, you're off.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
Too late.
Yeah, actually, this wasn't. We heard this was coming up through kind of the grapevine. I didn't even really know about it till I got the Facebook and Kai. So I can't make it. I have other things going on that day.
Looks
I wish
like
I had
none of
more
us would be
notice.
there.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have more notice because I would have liked to have gone. I'd like to participate and help out. Unfortunately, I'm not going to.
And the Denver one's still being planned, and that we will be updating you as it goes.
And we're hoping that's going to happen in Boulder again this year. That worked out pretty well last year, I think. So we're going to try and do that in Boulder again. All right. So moving on to we've titled this "Old Business," huh? So last week we had a conversation. We off the cuff read an email about the death of common sense, and it was entertaining at the time. But we got I had said something about the McDonald's Coffee case, and about that being ridiculous. And a listener had written us and was clarified a few points for me that I didn't really know much about this case. And after looking into it, and well, I don't have the gentleman's name, but he knows who he is. I was very much wrong. I mean, this is certainly not.
It wasn't
a common sense
completely
issue.
frivolous on it.
Oh no, it wasn't frivolous at all. So I put a link in here that talks about the actual facts case. And this woman suffered third-degree burns on her thighs and genitals, and was hospitalized for this incident. The coffee was kept at between 180 to 190 degrees. It was extremely hot. And she got the coffee. She wasn't driving. The car had been stopped, so it wasn't like somebody was driving the car at the time and they were adding cream and sugar, and that's when it spilled and burned her quite severely. So this really brought up an interesting conversation. And I've had conversations about common sense before, and I've always kind of dismissed common sense as not being so common. And I really think that there's a lot to be said for that. That common sense is more an emotional thing. People have things that they feel other people should see as common sense that aren't necessarily common sense.
Well, see, the interesting thing about this is when we read that email, knee-jerk reaction, our gut reaction, 99% of it was, well, hell yeah.
Well, in that lies the problem. Because, yes, that was our gut reaction. And you had said that to me that during the podcast. I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, when you start to review some of the things that were said in there, the issues are far more complicated than they give them credit for.
But if you look at what was said in there, it was all simplified. It didn't really have the facts. It was one person just saying, hey, this is, what I think is common sense. And no facts, nothing. Really just the basics. And you can take all sorts of things and make them so basic like that, they sound like something you could agree with when in fact, so much says no, there's more to it.
Well, and clearly the coffee is a good explanation of that. There's another one in there about a child, a young child, 6, 7 years old, that was accused of sexual harassment, which sounds like that's crazy, accusing a child that young of sexual harassment. But when you go start looking at the facts in the case, this child had repeated incidents, more than once made girls feel uncomfortable. And you look at that and it's like, well, something had to be this child was acting inappropriately and repeatedly. So you can say, well, I don't think that I think that maybe they went too far. But on the other hand,
they needed to make some sort of impact on the child if he wasn't
exactly.
stopping it.
Yeah, exactly. They needed to.
Well, and also send a message to his parents that, hey, listen, you need to be doing something. If you guys don't step up and kind of work with your child to deal with the problem, this is what can happen.
Right. So as I've gone through those, and I haven't gone through them all, but the ones that I have, I'm finding that the issues are far more complex, and these really don't have much to do with common sense. There is a few interesting things that they said in there that they seem pretty commonsensible. Don't spend more than you make. Well, how many people have ever bought a house or a car or more money than you have? I mean, we use credit for everything. So is it common sense to say don't spend more than you make? Well, then it's gonna be a while before I can buy a house. Maybe that's a good idea, but on the other hand, is getting credit going against common sense?
Sometimes it is, though.
Well, sometimes it is.
Sometimes
absolutely.
credit goes way too far.
Exactly, but that's a different issue entirely.
It doesn't mean that it's all bad.
Right.
No.
So all these issues are far more complex than we gave them credit for when we were doing that podcast. And yeah, so the idea for you to accept that email and those arguments in that email are knee-jerk reactions, because if you start thinking about them and start dissecting them and tearing them apart, they fall apart very quickly.
I took a look at the part of the email that said you can't defend yourself from a burglar in your home, and the burglar can sue you for assault. You can defend yourself from a burglar, and the burglar can actually file a civil case afterwards, but you'd have to get a pretty bad judge, or you'd have to be in some kind of egregious circumstance before the burglar had a leg to stand on.
Okay, but if I am robbing you, does that give you the right to beat me?
Well, there are the Make My Day laws.
Yeah, there are.
Which basically say that the person does have a right to protect his life and property.
Yeah, but
but you'd have to prove that yes, the person was not invited in. The person was some sort of danger.
Right. So even there, that it's more complicated. And with a lot of those, I've heard people say, that if you're going to use that, you better kill that burglar. It's like, wow.
I've heard that same thing.
Like, is that really the case?
The burglar can't come back at you and kill it.
Right. Exactly. It's like, wow. I mean, that's pretty extreme.
I've heard about not just the Make My Day laws, but somebody was discussing castle laws, as in a man's home is his castle, and they extend the castle laws out to the property and the vehicle. And I plan on doing a little more looking into those. Yeah.
So, but even that one, when you start to look at it, is it common sense that you should be able to, assault a burglar just because he's robbing your house? Do you have the right? I mean, it's not a common sense issue; it's a legal issue at that point.
Yeah,
it is a legal issue.
Well, he was talking about. Yeah, Mac was talking about the castle laws extending to your property. That can get really messy because if a kid decides to cut across the lawn, what right do you have to go after the kid?
Right.
Probably some people who would think, hey, I should be able to smack that kid good. Like, wait a moment, no.
Exactly.
Well, no, I think that if the kid crosses your property, you do have the right to sell him and his parents as serfs.
Really? Cool. Wow, I can start making a lot of money then. I live right across the street from that school, and you know how many times the kids cut through my lawn?
Wouldn't it be more common sense to...
Now, as your agent, I do take 15% of it.
Wouldn't it be more commonsensical to practice prevention?
Commonsensical.
Yes, commonsensical. I'm making up my own words tonight.
Practice prevention and...
As far as things like robbery goes, there are certainly things you do to make sure that your house is safe. And I don't know, it just seems like because someone breaks in, one, the chances of a robber who's trying to rob you breaking in when you're actually home are pretty slim because they don't want to be there when you're home.
That's
Right.
And
Well, that's true too.
the chance of them actually being armed and dangerous is actually very slim as well. Very rarely will they carry any kind of guns.
You know what they
Exactly,
say?
because the charges are more severe.
Right. A couple
Yeah.
prevention is worth a pound of
And
cure.
also go ahead.
I say a couple prevention is worth a pound of cure. Only I don't know
Is
how
that
to
a
measure
common
either.
sense thing, though?
I don't know how to measure them.
But yeah, generally your burglars are actually a pretty cowardly lot and will run away at the first sign of hearing anyone around.
Oh yeah, they don't want to be there.
Ian, let's hear you say that again, except say that in a more sepulchral voice. Say criminals are a cowardly, superstitious lot.
I don't quite have it in to mess with my voice tonight.
And then dress up like a bat. Anyway, I think a cup of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
An
Is
ounce.
only valid
Is it an
depending
ounce of
upon.
cure?
I think it's
An
only
ounce of
depending upon what
prevention.
temperature the cup is kept at, though.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Okay, well, I mean those, but how do I still, they don't fit on my scale. So anyway, we have a couple of Wikipedia articles in here. But I think that the last line if you go to Wikipedia for common sense, it says often ideas that may be considered to be true by common sense are in fact false. And I think,
No jackets in the cold does not equal getting sick.
there you go. See, there's one right there.
That's my pet peeve common sense one.
Cold will not make you sick.
The thing that I found interesting, though, here is that the common sense is actually something from Aristotle's time. It's something that's been with us for that long. And that being the case, I think we're always going to have an impulse to go, okay, well, if it's common sense, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, the
And
way
then
they were talking about it,
you may rethink it.
the way they were talking about it was more like a sixth sense, that it coordinated the other five senses and came up with an idea based on information, and so it was kind of,
An intuition.
yeah, rather than knowledge that makes sense to the whole that's held in common between people in a society. So it was very different than what I think of when I think phrase common sense.
Yeah. I think based upon this that I'm going to give up on using common sense and just stick with conventional wisdom instead.
And so that means in a few months we'll do things just like this on conventional wisdom and how you can perceive that all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yes,
stick to prudence and sound judgment.
Okay. Shall we?
I think so. I think we can move on now. I think we've beaten that one well enough, haven't
Yep.
we? All right, tell me about the flying car.
Okay, I thought this was cool. Basically, they have built a car which is set to hit the market in 2012. But essentially, it can transform from a car into a plane in about 30 seconds. It does require a pilot's license in order to drive the car.
Yeah,
or to
because
fly it.
it's a plane, not a car.
Yes. On the road, it with the wings tucked up, it can fill up with gasoline at a normal filling station, and it'll fit in an average-sized garage. But they're hoping to sell about 200 of them.
So not quite a mass market item.
Well, no, because you
No.
have to, you still have to be a pilot. All it means is that you
Yeah.
can drive it to the airport.
Yeah.
At least it's not a flying craft based on a Yuga. We talked about that in another podcast. Remember inventors killed by their own inventions?
Yeah, no, I remember a little while ago reading an article that talked about why there will never be flying cars, at least not to the extent that we've seen on TV and stuff, like the Back to the Future Jets and such.
Right.
Primarily because if you think of the traffic problems we have on the ground, you don't want that, several hundred feet above people's heads.
Yeah,
Yeah,
some
you
people
get
have a
some
hard
road
enough
rage
time
going
staying
on
on
up
the
there.
street.
That could get pretty nasty if you're busy having auto accidents in the sky. Well, it's a fun thing. It's definitely not practical to catch on.
It's a niche.
It's kind of a neat looking little thing though.
Yeah.
It is. And, if it's not practical right now, but it may become practical coming up here.
But it definitely looks like a plane.
Yeah, it looks a lot like a plane.
So now all you need is a mask, and you can fight the forces of venom.
Oh,
I'm
excellent.
wondering how many people got that reference.
I got it.
Well, good for both of you. I don't know. It's
All
something
right.
that Batman might.
You never played with the mask toys?
No.
They're
No,
vehicles that turn one to the other.
Oh, okay.
Batman has a plane, at least according to the Tim Burton movie, Batman has a plane that can be taken out by a single person with a revolver.
All right, let's move on.
Uh-huh.
Are we ready to talk about Mike Adams, the Health Ranger?
You need
Yeah.
an echo.
I know, I really do need an echo effect. Maybe I'll go back in and in post I'll make that echo.
Okay. Okay, as I think all our listeners know, we have some issues with homeopathy.
I don't know if they've picked up on that in the last 28 months.
Really? Because I've been so complimentary of it.
And I think it was the last podcast, or was it the one before that, where we talked about the massive overdose? I think it was the last.
It was the last one. Yeah.
And so what you have here is Mike Adams, who's apparently a big-time proponent of the.
Okay, no, it's not only homeopathy. It's anything natural.
Right.
You can apply the naturalistic fallacy to just about anything that Mike Adams comes up with, and Mike Adams. Yeah, Mike Adams.
I
him,
thought
Mike.
about naturalistic fallacy on this, but too easy.
Well, yeah,
anyway,
right, but he's trying to sell his crap, is what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
So
All right.
what you have, the first thing we have here is his rebuttal to massive overdose.
Okay, so so what he's trying to do here, the article starts off by I don't know, it starts off with an ad hominem attack that skeptics don't know what homeopathy is.
The article is nothing but an ad hominem attack.
Right.
on skeptics.
Oh, I wouldn't say it's nothing but an ad hominem attack.
There's all
It's an
sorts
ad
of
hominem
attacks.
attack from beginning to end, but he likes to dance around a few other fallacies while he's at it.
A few?
Okay, so he starts off by basically he starts off by basically accusing skeptics of not understanding what homeopathy is, and that the remedies and it's a no-brainer that you can't overdose on these things. Okay, but not only did people not overdose on them, they actually didn't suffer the relief that they should have gotten from. Many people took sleeping pills and stayed up all night after these overdoses.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't matter whether or not they killed him. It matters that they didn't have any effect at all.
Right, and I think that's the bigger point here is that that these medicines, not only can you not overdose on them because there's nothing in them, they also don't provide the beneficial effects that are claimed.
The only effect they provide is a placebo effect, and that's if you happen to believe that it's going to work.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so sticking to the article, go ahead, Ian.
Okay, so I put this under. Can you pick out something like that? List the ad hominem.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the logical fallacies here. Let's just cover the article.
Okay.
Because
So
the fallacies
the article-
are self-evident.
Yeah. So the various claims he makes is first off that drugs are toxic.
Okay, so
Everything is toxic somewhat.
well, and that's
Yes,
true, but
He's specifically going after drugs and modern medicine as being toxic.
okay, yeah. So and he goes into that pretty specifically, and he talks about how drugs, when you take these things, that you lower your IQ. That every time you get a vaccine, you are lowering your IQ. So he's anti-vaccination.
He has one line in there that really I thought so just he says, "You know drugs are kicking in when you start getting worse." Which is quite odd because when I have a headache and I take ibuprofen, I get better.
Do you get stupider
That's how
too,
it
though?
works for it. I
Yeah,
normally feel
anyone with
dumber
a
before
kid
I
with
take
an
the
ear
ibuprofen
infection?
because I have a headache and I'm not concentrating.
Right. Yeah. Well, so in that lies one of the big issues here with what he's saying is that he's claiming that all these things are toxic. Well, in a sense, he's not lying. They are. Chemotherapy, which he loves to harp on here, yes, is toxic, but
That's the point.
that's the point. And at certain levels, we can use that toxicity to our advantage. So we can use these techniques and these drugs at levels that are safe for the people that are using them and are effective at
That's why you
helping
have
the immune
prescribed
system.
dosage.
Right. Exactly, and he intentionally glosses over those facts in the article that these things are being used at safe levels. And he's saying, well, go ahead and go overdose on one of these. Well, we wouldn't be so stupid because I know that there's actual active ingredients in them, and that they're actually effective. And we have clinical trials to show that these things work, and we have a whole bunch of clinical trials to show that homeopathy has been ineffective based on their claims.
Well, and here's something interesting about this article by Mike Adams. I've gone through this a couple different times, and I don't really see anything in the article where he actually says that homeopathy is beneficial.
He does. So when he's attacking skeptics for not understanding how they work, he starts talking about how they work at a harmonic frequency. So they work just like the power balance bracelets. And Jen's point about these was, well, then why don't you just wear them if it's the harmonics that
Exactly. You just buy one thing of pills and just carry it with you. Then you don't have to keep going back and getting more pills.
Excellent.
Well,
Because he yells at the big pharma for creating return customers.
Well, homeopathy isn't curing anything either. And
right.
In Western medicine,
rephrase that.
I'm sorry.
Homeopathy isn't curing anything.
Right.
Whereas
Western medicine, in a sense though, even Western medicine isn't curing anything. The body is still doing the cure. When you have strep, they give you penicillin. All the penicillin does is knock the strep down long enough for the body's own immune system to be able to fight it. So it's an assistance to your immune system to still fight it off. So our medicine is still based on the fact that our immune systems have to do the work. Our body has to do the healing.
Right.
And we're giving it an advantage to do that better, but we're not really providing cures. And they're not claiming to either. That's the whole thing about this, is that these people are claiming that they have cures. Well, we do know that, when you get sick with certain illnesses, that you need medications so that your body can fight these things off.
Now, Brian, are you sure that he actually says that homeopathy is beneficial in here?
Maybe not. I mean,
he says homeopathy isn't a drug. It's not a chemical. You can drink all you want and you won't overdose on it. It's a remarkable advantage. It means that while 200,000 plus Americans are killed each year by toxic pharmaceutical drugs, no one is harmed by homeopathy. But he doesn't actually say in there that it helps.
So
he says it's a chemical, it's a resonance, it's a vibration or a harmony, it's the restructuring of water to resonate with the particular energy of a plant or substance.
Okay.
We can get into the physics of it in a subsequent article, but for now it's easy to recognize that even from a conventional physics point of view, liquid water has tremendous energy and is constantly in motion.
See, but right therein lies the problem. It has tremendous energy. Well, okay, if you can split those atoms, absolutely, there could be a potential for some tremendous energy there. But as water is, it is basically an inert, and it isn't really providing any sort of energy.
And he tries to go into science some by looking at the new discoveries about electrons.
Right.
But in doing so, he insults everyone and says, "Oh, they don't know all this stuff." No, actually, science is looking into that, and vibrations aren't really accurate as to what electrons are. But he's trying to pretend to have some scientific background, and then he makes the claim that this won't be taught in universities until 2020. No, it'll be taught in universities as the facts come up to defend exactly what's going on with them.
Well, and then he makes the claims that people don't understand the theories of homeopathy. Well, we know that there's no actual theories there. At best, we can consider them in science as hypotheses, but there's no theory there because they don't work. So they don't get to have the definition of theory. They only get hypothesis at best. And because you can have a million hypotheses that are wrong. And homeopathy does not work. He wants to get into the physics of it. Okay, let's talk about the law of thermodynamics. You cannot get more energy out of something than you put in. If you remove all the active chemicals, you're removing the energy that is in there.
And I'm still pretty sure that he doesn't actually say it's beneficial.
He might not.
All he says is that it's not harmful.
I will say this, and you're probably right that technically he doesn't say that. I got the feeling that he was claiming that it was beneficial as I read the article.
Well, common sense will tell you.
Common sense will also tell you that when you dilute something past the point of there being any molecules left in there, you have water.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, you do have dihydrogen monoxide when you're done, which we know has been used as a chemical solvent in nuclear power plants. The stuff is deadly.
And it has been very toxic to people.
Well, and you can't overdose on dihydrogen monoxide. If you drink enough of it, you can get a high. You will wash all the chemicals out of your body, and which is really dangerous. But you can get high off of water. You can't overdose.
So he says he calls surgery barbaric, which I find quite interesting nowadays. It's like gallbladder removal. 3 little slits is all it takes to go in with really sensitive stuff and take it out.
You're talking laparoscopics, right?
Yeah, it barely hurt. There's so many persons nowadays that are that simple that homeopathy will do nothing. That stuff he sells.
Well, no.
And you will most likely die. But surgery, they don't need to be barbaric. They don't need to cut you open and really go in. Little slits, slip in some fiber optic stuff, you're done. That doesn't sound very barbaric to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you look on his site here, it's calling some natural media, and the claims are 98% organic, 100% natural. Well, those are kind of one and the same. How can it only be? I mean, it should be 100% organic, right? If I'm gonna ingest it, I would prefer that.
But you know what else is 100% organic, natural? Poison ivy.
Well,
I wouldn't recommend just that.
Well, I would prefer hemlock if I'm gonna drink a plant.
Well, you guys just blanked out there.
No, just you. Yeah, it's just you.
Okay.
You were having one of those, lapses.
I guess. All right. Well, so let's move on and talk about the harm of it.
Oh, okay. So I put this in. Well, the next thing is that Steve Novella wrote a very good article, and that goes through and points out I didn't feel ad hominem attacks where Mike Adams got it wrong. And so that article, we've got that article here, and it's pretty good.
There was a little ad hominem.
Okay, there was a little.
He said
okay.
He said that Mike Adams never met an argument too stupid.
Okay. Well, but that's an attack, right?
That may actually be in fact.
Let me give you let me make the ad hominem attack here and say that Mike Adams knows nothing about health. He's an idiot. There, see, I've said it. Now nobody else has to. You can reach me at. All right, the harm of homeopathy. I put this in here because they want to claim that there's no harm in homeopathy, and that's one of the claims that he made. So I linked to What's the Harm, their homeopathy page, and it goes through a list of people that have died, mainly because they did homeopathy instead of a treatment that could have helped them. And right. A lot of these, were preventable. The first one died of asthma.
55-year-old woman died of an asthma attack because she was instructed by a homeopath to not take her asthma medication.
Right. Asthma is very controllable with modern medicines. So, I mean, there are extreme cases, where people still might, die from an asthma attack, but the majority of them are pretty good.
Manage their life well.
They manage their life. And the medicines have gotten so much better. I know, being an asthmatic, that the medicines I used to take as a kid compared to the ones now, I have so much fewer side effects, and I think that they actually work better for me. But I know that I don't shake
you're not
and stuff.
Ingesting.
Right, yeah, when I had to take those pills, they were terrible. Ugh. And so this is a list, pretty much, of people that have been killed by homeopathy for different illnesses. Some of them, there's one HIV. They started taking.
Actually, not all of them were killed. There were a few that were messed up by it, but not all of them.
Inadequate treatment.
Inadequate treatment, yeah. So
untreated cancer.
Yeah. So there certainly is harm here, and people need to be aware of that. But there are harms to taking modern medicines too. But at least you can ask your doctor about them. If you ask a homeopath what the dangers are of taking homeopathy, well, there are none because it's not toxic.
No, wow. That's not the danger. The danger is in not doing what
the proper treatments, right? So, yep. So there you go. All right. So I'll tell you what. When I go to confession from now on, I'm sending a text message.
That's not what it does.
I'm sorry.
That's the next step.
Oh.
All right. Tell me about the iPhone app for Catholics.
Well, I'm not surprised it happened. You could almost see this coming, but
well, why not? So there's an app for everything else.
Yeah. So there's a new app for the iPhone that what it does. The idea is, if you're Catholic, you can download this, and before you go and confess, you basically prepare everything out so you know how badly sin.
Really?
That's not quite what they're aiming for.
Okay, to me, it seemed more like an organizational tool so that you could, lay it out for the priest a little easier and quicker. That way he could get through confession quicker.
It's supposed to be something
if they really want a useful,
thing.
If they really want to put in a useful app here, they really should give you something that actually directs you to which priests are known in the business as a light penance.
All right. Okay.
It also has the ability to add sins that aren't listed. I
love that too. Okay, so we're being flippant here, but the fact of the matter is that I see no real problem with this app.
No, it's just more of an amusing thing to kind of look at.
But
basically, the idea is you can prepare yourself ahead of time. Now, the Vatican still have said this is a good thing, but you still have to go and confess it, which is a big surprise there. If it wasn't for confessing stuff, they'd lose a little of their business.
Well, they can't get your money if they don't get you into the church.
It's not it's not 100% approved then. But
No, it is. The Vatican approved it. I mean, they basically came out and said, listen, this is fine. It works. But it doesn't mean you don't have to still go to the priest.
Yeah, you're not emailing the priest your confession.
Right.
Well, see, now what you
Because
gotta
one
do
of the
is
things
you
about
go to
confession is that
booth.
it's supposed to be anonymous.
You go in your confess booth, you plug the iPhone in, just download all, and the priest will look, oh, that's what you did. Okay.
Well, I think even better, you're sitting there, and so tell me, child, have you sinned? Well, Father, didn't you get my text? I sent you an email with the whole list. It was a long one. I don't want to go through it here now. How many Holy Fathers do I got to do?
Terrible.
Yeah, but it still feels like it's headed that way.
Well, no, one of the big things about Catholic confession as opposed to maybe other denominations of Christianity is that part of it is that saying it out loud to another person makes it more real and really makes you acknowledge what the sin was and take ownership of the wrongs that you've done.
I'm trying to remember the movie. I think it We're No Angel or something like that. Matt Damon was in it, and it was at a Catholic school, and they were getting ready for confession, and he was actually helping the other kids go through, okay, no, you don't confess to that. Cross that out. Now you have to add that you've lied another time. It was really just something you confess to. No, you don't want to admit to that, so you have to turn it into a different sin that you'll admit to, and that way it cancels it out.
Yeah, there's always somebody trying to work the system.
that's what I'm saying. Go to a priest who's a light penance. That's actually something I took off an old George Carlin routine. He's like, it's not that he didn't understand the sins. It's just that he didn't seem to take them quite so personally.
All right, well, this doesn't quite count as insanity, so let's move on to something that does count as insanity.
Okay. No. So this is another. I don't know. This one's possession, but this. Okay. So another terrible case where a parent has damaged their young child and claimed that the child was possessed. In this particular instance, the child, the mother slapped the child extremely hard in the head. What were we going to say?
It was a
she had to
mother who... I'm not sure if I believe that she thinks that ahead of time or if she came up with that after.
No, it's afterwards.
I kind of got the impression she came up with it afterwards.
Yeah, it's afterwards. You know what? It's another bogus defense as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what is really irritating me about every single one of these cases. And in this one, it's particularly blatant. The other ones, it seemed like, they might have started out saying that, we're exorcising the person. This seems clearly to be an afterthought. That child, she smacked it upside the head extremely hard.
Well, and she would have had to have shaken the child, too.
Not according to what I've read. A blunt force trauma to the head could cause these things.
Well, the article I listened to, the Nancy Grace thing, was talking about shaking.
Yeah, they talked about shaking, but I don't think that was
rupturing the eyes.
Right, but actually, if you hit the kid in the head hard enough, you can create the same effect. And I listened to the sheriff's press conference, and the sheriff said that it was a blunt force strike to the head, and so that's what the sheriff has said. I've only heard in one place about this being a possession, and it's only here, and it's almost like a footnote. It's barely mentioned, and it's only mentioned once. I've been looking for more information on this, and there isn't any. I suspect that when this goes to court, we're not going to hear about possession again, or about the kid being possessed.
It sounds like she might have been testing the waters.
Yeah, perhaps.
I think the only
was high at
possession
the
we'll hear
time.
about, and when it goes to court, is the possession of the pot she was smoking.
Well, there you go. That's the thing that really kills me about this case, is that the child was clearly injured, and she put it in her crib and smoked a joint. I mean, that is just two joints. That is just so negligent. So you say you tell me that I don't care whether that kid is possessed or not. That is negligence.
Actually, I do kind of find that understandable on a level, because I'm sure she didn't intend for any harm to come to the child.
Probably not.
And
but,
when she put the baby down, she was hoping that she'd come back and everything would be fine. But, clearly it wasn't.
It's just, I don't know. So both the articles in here are about the same case. I tried to find as much information as possible, and I found a few more articles since this.
Yeah, the reason I was confused was because the second article mentioned absolutely nothing about possession.
Well, and that's kind of the point that I was making. Is that it was a random defense. You know, to me, it seemed very random.
But that's one thing you get. You know, they're trying to. A person like that is trying to use the sympathy of the religious community,
Right?
To make her look like not as screwed up as she is.
Which is not going to work in a court of law.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think that they'll accept those claims. I think that you would have to scientifically prove your case for possession, which, to my knowledge, has not been done. I haven't seen any evidence.
If it could actually be proved, it would get her off, because possession is 9/10 of the law.
I guess you could say she possessed the child at the time.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Tell me about the grandmother.
All right, well, a quick thing. The next 4 stories I have put under here as a look at our society, I think almost fit the theme we originally started with about common sense and how different perspectives, because I think each one of these really kind of can be taken in interesting ways on different perspectives. So that's one reason why they're here, is not necessarily because they really have too much of a skeptical ideas, but because they are levels of our society where you can really look at what's going on and take it in so many different ways. So the first one, you have Christine Case from Chicago, Illinois, 61, and she just gave birth to her grandson.
It's not an incest thing.
No, it's definitely not.
Basically, her daughter was infertile. She still had good eggs, but she just couldn't. Her uterus wasn't taking. So the grandmother went through tests to make sure she was physically able to do this, and she basically said, "Okay, we'll do in vitro fertilization, and you'll put it in me." And so she carried her grandson for a full term in order to make sure she had a grandchild, because it meant quite a bit to her daughter. And some of this sounds a bit weird. That's the thing, especially
Actually, it's a nice
stuff like that.
it's a nice triumph for the family.
Right. That's what I think most people see it that way. But once more going with the idea of common sense having different perspectives, you can't see some people who will find this kind of disturbing.
Well,
I have to admit,
it's against God. God did not want her to have a child, and so this is going against God. This is sinful.
Yeah.
There's certainly that perspective. My first thought was, there's a lot of hormonal, emotional stuff going on being pregnant and carrying a child. And for her, as being the grandmother, she's going to want to be involved in the life of her grandchild regardless. But having carried the child, I think that she's going to have sort of a higher level of bonding, so to speak, and that passing it off to her daughter could be a little awkward. I mean, there's certainly been times when people have decided to give up their child for adoption, even to someone that they're completely separate from, didn't see the child, and were like, you know what, I want that child back.
But couldn't you say that of any surrogate, though, really?
Yeah. But I think because they're in close proximity, they're going to keep seeing each other, that to a certain extent it would be really odd. Hopefully they have a good enough relationship that it's going to be great. Right. But I know that when I had my first child, I really didn't want anybody interfering with my time with that child, especially because it was the first one. It was like, I really want to remember this experience. And I don't know, I think it could make for some awkward moments.
It was horrible. I had to sleep in the garage.
I think, on the other hand, Grandma might get to do all the spoiling and none of the raising.
Well, that's probably, that's typical of grandmas, though. But, there's something to be said for what Jen is saying here.
Yeah, there will be a difference to that relationship. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
I can't see it not being a standard grandmother-grandson relationship. There's going to be a different bond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like I should mention that I never went through the experience of trying to get pregnant. We talked about it once, and we have 3 kids. So I can't identify with her having, it said that she'd carried twins and they were born stillborn, and then she miscarried. I never went through all that, I'm trying to get pregnant, and then it went wrong, and then trying again, and it went wrong, and trying. So, from that side of things, I can't identify emotionally with where she was in her.
Well, and if you read the book that I'm suggesting, Sex Before Dawn, you might get some clues as to why these things might happen the way that they did.
So then, let's see, the next one is Natalie Monroe of Philadelphia, 30-year-old high school teacher.
I'm so glad you put this in here.
She has an online blog where apparently she went off about her being lazy whiners and when everything handed to him, stuff like that. And apparently some of her students saw the blog and realized it was her and reported her. And so now she is on suspension with pay, and of course is looking to legal action.
Mm-hmm.
And so this one is definitely an interesting one where it comes down to what, can you say? If it's also an interesting note. At the time she did this, she was 8 months pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's not an excuse.
Well, but she had the blog for a couple of years.
The hormonal, yeah.
Yeah. It's true. I can relate to there being a hormonal component, but she had the blog for several years, and there was some positive stuff, and then there was some negative stuff. People seemed to take issue with the amount of cursing. It was her personal blog, But a couple things. You have to be able to bond with the kids in your class and establish some sort of relationship from the beginning. And I remember years ago, I worked for a very short time in a preschool that I did not think was a very good place. And they took kids who were in half-day kindergarten, and they would go and pick them up and bring them back. And so they had a qualified kindergarten teacher running that program, and they did after-school care. And she spent so much time just yelling at kids, yelling. And she asked me one time, why don't these children listen to me? If you are constantly yelling at people, they don't listen to you. If you really want students in your class to be motivated, you need to tell them from day one, these are my expectations. I'm not going to argue about grades. I expect you to work, but be able to do it in a respectful way and actually get to know each child in the classroom in a certain way.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Well, but if you do those things at the very beginning of the year, then you're establishing what your expectations are in class and what you're going to accept. You remember that you knew which teachers were hard teachers. Even if you were never in that teacher's class, you had an idea of what different teachers' styles were like. So
right.
She's got a certain amount of personal responsibility for what's going on in the classroom, but I think it's entirely possible that there were a bunch of self-entitled whiners in her class, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, we all get frustrated at times, and we all, I don't know anyone who hasn't at some point gone and vented someone else.
Exactly.
With their frustrations about the job and stuff. And that's what it sounds like she was doing here, but it was more of an open forum, and that's where the problem comes. She's venting her frustrations in a manner where the people she's venting about are very likely to see it.
Well, that would be
she made the blog 18 and older.
And it was anonymous, and she changed names. I mean, she wasn't being completely unaware of, how you should behave online as far as protecting people's privacy. I mean, she wasn't a complete noob, but obviously people were able to put two and two together and figure out who it was.
Okay, so was she wrong to do so?
Clearly she'd done some good teaching the math.
Well, okay, so was she wrong to do this? Was this inappropriate? I'm torn.
It was inappropriate, but was she wrong to vent her free speech rights? No. It was inappropriate the forum that she chose. It was inappropriate. It was less than constructive, but I think that as far as from a free speech standpoint goes, she had the right to say everything she said.
So, I mean, there's the other side of this. If I'm the student and I find this, boy, I'm going to be really pissed.
But how many kids on their blogs bitch and moan about teachers?
Well, okay, so, but in that is, I mean, that's a good point. So you have to, there's something to be learned for being
the adult in the situation.
Exactly. There you go.
One of the notes I wrote for myself, sorry to cut you off.
Oh, hey, no problem.
Is that one of the things that we know makes better teachers is when a new teacher starts off, if they are mentored by someone and they have a support system in the school where they work of being able to bounce ideas off of people and vent to senior staff and get that sort of support. We don't know what kind of support system is in place in the school to help teachers be able to vent in appropriate places and ways.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that I'm not going to get on a blog somewhere and vent about my boss or about my coworkers. I am not doing it. Even, I don't care how anonymous I make it, that's liable to come back on you. Yeah. That's just common sense.
Yes.
Well, it has come back. You can look at all sorts of stories where it has come back to people.
Well, I think we should talk about, constructive ways of saying what you feel about situations and being logical and working through things and not going off on ad hominem attacks. You know, if you're just yelling about how stupid and whiny and lazy all these other people are, you're not problem solving, you're just venting.
But there's got to be a way to vent as well.
Exactly. So that's up to the school district to be putting protocols in place to support teachers so that they have a place to work out these problems and vent appropriately and then problem solve and move past the emotion of the moment.
The question that occurs to me here is I wonder how much of what she put in the blog was accurate and how much of it was overplayed, because when you're writing a blog, you tend to write a blog for entertainment.
Well, that's true, too. You want people to read it, and if it's too bland, you won't. So they might be spicing it up a little.
Yeah.
So it's possible that she got carried away with her thoughts and took them too far for the sake of entertainment.
Right.
So, just a thought there.
All right, so let's move on to Little Girls Gone Wild. Why daughters are acting too sexy too soon.
Well, in some ways, it's almost should be Brian and Jen's thing more than mine. Because actually are directly dealing with it. Well, I have 2 boys. But the basic idea, and I think everyone's kind of seen this, there does seem to be more sexuality at a younger age.
Yeah, because, you know, there's so many
about
12-year-olds running off and getting married.
According to the Bible, I think that's okay.
Yeah. Bible has nothing to that.
Sorry, go.
But it talks more about the sexualization of our society. And there's some interesting stuff in it in regards to how the girls are dressing nowadays, what they're exposed to, what you can find out there.
Showing off their ankles, it says.
But
You know,
it's a bit interesting.
the sexy ankle porn site is my favorite.
Sorry. I do take this more seriously than I'll behave.
Now,
No, by all means,
it's
hunt.
interesting that
Sorry. Go on, Ian.
I think we'll get back to the article.
Yep.
So,
Back
the
to the Little
article,
Miss Sunshine article.
Oh.
Hey, there's a point there.
Yes, there is.
yeah, there is.
At your age, you'd be crazy to do cocaine. At mine, you'd be crazy not to.
So anyways, one of the interesting things the article tries to claim is that the Disney princess ideas are a big part of the problem, which I kind of disagree with. But, you know, they try to make their case. Now, one of the interesting things about the princess, which I'm trying to remember, I think my dad sent it to me, a picture of the Disney princess, and it asks you to name, and I could only name one, and that was the Prince of the Little Mermaid, because he's Eric.
Okay.
It's about try and name any of the other princes from Disney.
Okay.
I think they all have names. But you
There's
never
at
get
least
them.
2 of them that were named Charming.
Yeah, that's true. There's a couple of Prince
But
Charming.
I think they have real names beyond that. But no one really knows them
Well,
because
Yeah.
they are
Well, if you
background
read the
characters.
books, all the books based off the movies generally have
Okay,
mentioned the name. But
so name me some princes.
it seems to me that the Prince in Beauty and the Beast was never referred to by name.
I know that Cinderella, that prince has a name.
But do you know what it is?
No, not a clue.
Sleeping Beauty had a name. Sleeping Beauty's prince had a name, but I can't for the life of me think of it. But I know that I've read it and I've heard it.
Okay.
Prince Stephen,
So
maybe? Or was it King
The
Stephen?
Disney
Stephen was
princess
her dad.
thing's an interesting idea to try and say it sexualizes women because the Disney princess thing seems to say the men are just there in the background for you.
Well, it
Yeah.
wasn't the that the princesses specifically over-sexualize kids. It's that it indoctrinates them into this idea of consumerism equals my sex appeal.
You know what?
Right.
This is really easy. There's a real clear answer as to why we don't remember the princes. Because girls like to be princesses, boys like to be pirates. They don't want to be
The boys don't care
princes.
about-
I've known plenty of little boys who were Prince Eric
Hey, leave your logic out of this.
and Shrek.
Okay,
There's a
so I
little-
remembered the name of that prince.
Okay.
It was Jack Sparrow.
Oh.
Okay, no, seriously
No.
though. I think that one of the other things with the Disney princesses, though, at least the early Disney princesses, was essentially you're looking at a girl who's waiting for a man to come along and solve her problems. And that's gotten less prevalent in the newer Disney movies, but in the early Disney movies, it's pretty much what it was all about.
That's funny. The prince in Cinderella is really Prince Charming.
Yeah.
I don't think he has
See,
a name.
I thought so. I thought so.
But Sleeping Beauty, he does have a name.
All right, let's take a look here. I'm going to Wikipedia. Doggone it, I'm going to Wikipedia.
Okay, some of my thoughts on this.
Prince Philip.
Yep,
Okay.
Philip. Stefan was her dad. His name is Philip. This is when skepticism can have an impact on people's lives, because one of the things they talked about was advertising and the amount of advertising that kids are seeing a year, and they listed 40,000 ads a year. Young children don't have logical thinking brains, and so they tend to take things at face value and just kind of absorb everything, because very young children especially are meant to absorb everything so they can figure out the world. So our children all the time come up with, hey, product X does this. And so we go, really, how do you know? And so we ask them about claims and advertisements, and we ask them to logic things out and think about them. And so we have conversations with them about what they're seeing on TV, what ads they're seeing and hearing on the radio, and whether things make logical sense or if they just sound really good because they use a lot of bells and whistles and fancy words.
And it falls on deaf ears, even after we have these conversations with them.
That's
Well, it said
not
so.
true.
Oh, come on.
After a while, it does sink in, but it's not just, you can't expect to have the conversation one time.
Okay, that's true.
Our kids do like to be princesses, but they've always got a complex story that's going on, and, you know, sometimes they're fighting dragons, and today it was princesses and Transformers.
Yeah, well, they spent some time with my boys today.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. Well, yeah, so they were doing Terminators today. That's your boys' new big thing is Terminators.
Yeah.
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 But now, there was one good line in here. Let's see. It was
Oh, good,
Diane
because
Levy.
the rest of the trash was boring.
Well, it was one line that really, to me, sums it up more than anything else and actually makes sense of both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And the line was, you can't say, here's the right answer. With all this stuff, you can't just say, okay, this is the way it is. It's like, no, it's more complicated than that. There's more to it. There's more going on.
It's common sense.
But you can't just pin it down to real basic things. You know, and you can't just tell a kid, this is the way it is. No, you have to go into more depth, and as a parent, you have to make sure they understand why, you know, things are the way they are. You can't just leave it open.
Wait, you're trying to get your kids to think? You're failing as a parent.
Now, the other point I want to make on this, which I thought was interesting, is I tried to defend the idea of girls being in sports, which I have no problem with. But it's trying to claim that sports aren't going to create the same problem. And I disagree with that. I think sports are actually very sexualized. You look at sport heroes and stuff, they are sex icons. And to think that, oh, well, if I get the girl involved in sports, it won't have this, any sexualization to it. It's like, no. Sports are great. If they love them, get them involved. But don't expect there to be no sexualization coming out of that, because there is a sexual institution. And so that itself is not going to counter the sexualization, the idea that you need to have some of these issues. They'll just give them, you know, a different outlet.
So is this the Iowa girls respect boys who refuse to wrestle article?
Well, yeah, well, this is definitely going to the next one, which was an interesting thing.
Well, before we move off of the over-sexualization, there are plenty of alternatives to princesses and giving your 2-year-old high heels. As a parent, you have a choice in the things that you buy and the limits that you set. And if you are, you know, thinking about it and talking to your children about it and having clear limits, but, you know, giving children appropriate responsibilities for their age, you're not going to run into huge problems later on. It's about being conscious parents and not assuming that buying stuff is the same as, you know, giving your child attention and interaction.
Right. The article itself even says there seems to be a problem building up with people not being able to say no to their kids. And that's a very important thing with raising kids, is to say no to them. You don't want to, and it can lead to some fits and such, but you have to learn that there are times where, you say no and you stand your ground.
I tell people a lot that sometimes working with young kids, and some children more so than others, it's like working with a dog, with puppies. You have to be the adult in charge. And yes, children are on a higher level than a dog, but you'll get the screaming and the fits when you say no. But an hour later, they'll be happier because they know that they're safe in your care and that there are boundaries and they're not responsible for everything, because the world is a really big place to young children. And it's actually scarier for them to have too much control over what's going on because they really don't understand everything. So, yes, appropriate use of no.
All right. So, Iowa girls respect boys who refuse to wrestle her. Iowa girl.
Yeah, now this
girl. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Not girl, not plural. One girl.
Well, there
there
were
were
actually
two.
two girls who made it, but only one that was actually caught up in.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so you have Joel Northup, who is a homeschooled young man who, through one of the high schools, is part of the wrestling team there. He said he would not wrestle Casey Harkelman because his religious beliefs tell him to respect women, and his idea of respect says he cannot engage in that kind of activity that might cause harm to her.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. But
I can respect that basic idea.
Really, I can kind of disrespect that idea because if she wants to wrestle, is it right to say that she can't?
Well, she was
Well, yeah,
able to.
well,
What
no,
he did was
He
say.
didn't say that she couldn't wrestle. He said that he wouldn't wrestle with her.
Okay.
So he basically forfeited.
He made a
the
choice
game.
for him, not a choice for her.
So he was scared.
Well, you can say that. I can see some jokes going around about him. Oh, he just didn't want to risk being beaten by a girl. But if this really was his religious beliefs, I can respect that. But it comes down to the idea of what is respect for women.
Aha.
Now, this came up about a year and a half ago at Scout Camp. I had gone, we did this thing because my oldest boy was a Weeblo, and you go up to the plateau, and the Weeblos and their families camp up there for the night. Well, once it gets dark, anyone that wants to could do a little extra hike up into a little higher up. Great place to see the stars on a clear night. It was a beautiful, fun hike. I went with my boys on the hike. My wife stayed behind. Well, we came back down, and we between me and my wife, we only had one camp chair. She had gotten up out of the camp chair, and here I was exhausted from this extra hike. She had been sitting down there for the last half hour or so in the chair. I decided, you know what, I'm going to sit down in the chair because I didn't feel like going all the way down to the ground and getting all the way back up. Well, then she comes back out. It's like, hey, you took my chair. I just looked at her like, yeah. Well, another guy there was a bit puzzled by it, and he was like, and he got into the idea of chivalry and stuff. And I'm like, okay. The way I see it is, me and my wife are pretty much, if she had an actual need for this chair, like she had done something more exhausting than me, she was sick, something like that, I would give it up for her. But at this point, I don't feel she has more of a need for it, and she can just as easily sit on the ground as I can. And in that situation, both me and the other guy had a different idea of what respect for women is.
You know, this is an interesting topic, and I think that we could dive into this maybe a little more later, where we are starting to run long, because I do think that this what you're about to head into here could be quite a discussion when we could start to talk about feminism and some really interesting issues that this could lead into, and I'd like to have that discussion, just not at this point.
Fair enough.
Save for another show.
Yeah, please. Yeah. And let's
let me throw this question out there though about this guy who was appealing to chivalry when you took the chair away from your wife.
He turns it into a fallacy.
I was going to say, how much gear did he pack in? Did he actually have a couple horses and lances on him?
I was actually going to refer to the article, Mac. It's fine if he wants to say that he doesn't want to wrestle her and he decided to stay back from that particular match. And she was fine with it. She's like, hey, that's his beliefs, it's fine.
Well,
if she hadn't been...
by default.
Exactly, because he I can't think of the word, but he stepped
Forfeited.
back. Forfeited. Thank you. But it wasn't that big a deal because she's a girl and he's a boy and he decided it was about that. If she had been a boy but a different religion and he said, I'm not going to wrestle because of this.
Yeah, what if it was a Muslim and he won't wrestle a Christian, right? I mean, now it's the same thing, right? Because his religious beliefs, let's say, and I don't know that would actually be true.
Exactly. Or, you don't want to wrestle him because he's from a lower caste and he's unclean. There are any number of situations where somebody could step back and go, my religious beliefs say I shouldn't touch that person.
I won't wrestle gingers. Just saying.
Or a Jewish cowboy who won't throw cows because they have cloven hoofs.
There you go. See?
Yeah, it could very easily devolve into ridiculousness. So
right.
I'm glad that for them it wasn't that big a deal. But yeah, at some point,
when it all comes down to it, he wasn't saying she shouldn't wrestle.
Exactly.
He was saying he would not wrestle her because of his beliefs.
Okay.
And that's what the Constitution is all about.
Yeah, okay. I'm just saying that if it had been another circumstance, that even though we were respecting his beliefs, in another circumstance, this could be looked at as religious intolerance.
Yep, exactly.
It could.
Or racial intolerance, or something else. I won't wrestle blacks.
Right.
I won't wrestle gingers. So in this particular case, we as a society can accept this fairly easily. But if it had been another reason, people might be upset and in arms
And
about
you make
it.
a really good point.
All right, so are we moving on here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just wanted to mention a book that I just recently read, and it's called Sex Before Dawn. And if anybody listens to the This Week in Science podcast,
Sex at Dawn, Brian.
Sex at is it
I
Sex
looked it
at
up on
Dawn?
the
I'm
Amazon
sorry.
page. Sex at Dawn.
Okay, I'm sorry. I will definitely fix that. It is okay. I swear that I read the book.
Maybe you read
He's
the
been bugging me about it all week.
I loved this book. It was such an eye opener for me. The way that it's written, we have all these, I don't know,
Cultural and societal
Right.
biases and
Exactly. That this really kind of says, hey, listen, we need to step back and take a look at what evolution says we're really geared towards. And it talks about how, religion says that God created us, to be one man and one woman. But yet you look at what our needs are and where we actually evolved from, and it's like, well, hey, wait a second. That is probably not true. And religion is steering us wrong. And they're not dealing with the actual underlying issues that are making their system break down. It was an excellent book, a really fun read. It's entertaining all the way through. So not only is it a science book, but it's humorous, and the way that it's put together, it was a lot of fun to read. I really enjoyed it. I recommend it to everybody. So, especially, and anybody, actually. I recommend it to you, but, I think that Ian and Mac and everybody would get a real kick out of this. So,
I think
Sex
I'd
at
enjoy
Dawn.
it. But is Sex Before Dawn, is it the prequel?
at
Because
dawn.
I understand that it takes a darker tone.
Terrible. I tried to change it.
Because you're trying to reach Google.
Oh, I'm having a problem connecting to Google today.
Yep, I'll check.
All right, you change it. Anyway, so it was a great read, a lot of fun.
I fixed it.
Okay, let's see. And of course, I can't see. Let me refresh. All right, is there anything else, guys?
This is wrap.
Is it a wrap?
So,
I think we're good.
Can we call this one another one in the Tupperware container?
We can.
Excellent.
Do we keep it up fresh?
I prefer brass urns.
Oh, brass urns. Whatever.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast. For more information about the Amateur Skeptics, go to amateurskeptics.com. To send us feedback, suggestions, or big flaming insults, feel free to contact us at WTF@amateurskeptics.com. Other contact information can be found on our website.
You can leave a voicemail for the Amateur Skeptics podcast at 720-295-7785. Music for this podcast was provided by OFM. To find out more about OFM, go to myspace.com/OFMHQ. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons, No Derivatives 3.5 license. Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast.